Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we're here today bringing you, I think this is our third YouTube video. It's exciting, man. We're rolling now. I set up a new background for us. We look crisp. You got the mustache coming in, and you've got way better lighting than last week, if I'm being honest. So
I'm just here to look good. I'm wearing my fishy hat, and I've got a mustache on. I'm here to scare away the uninitiated. But no, yeah, good to be back. Good to be smiling for all the people watching us on YouTube, and ready to talk about some fun games.
Yep. So we've got Mariners today. We've got the Sounders played one game. We'll talk about that. We've got the Storm finishing out their season here. When this comes out, it'll be today, but tomorrow for us. And then we obviously got to talk that Washington-Wazoo game and some Seahawks. So anything you want to say before we kick it off, buddy?
No, we got it all. Come listen.
All right. Here is some Coyote Picnic. All right. So, first things first, I think we dive into what is a very frustrating Mariners season still. Even though they have gone, I think they've won 4 of their last 5, or 3 of their last 4. I don't exactly remember off the top of my head. 3 of their last 4. They lost 1 to the Rangers and then lost to the Yankees yesterday. How are we feeling? We recorded, I think, at the end of the Padres series, or they had just lost to the Rangers last week. So, how are we feeling?
Yeah, if this was the second week in the season, I would be encouraged by a nice series win against the Texas Rangers, and would be looking on building off of that. Problem is, we've talked about this before, and I think this will be a shorter Mariners discussion than we normally have because things are wrapping up. Doors are closing. Windows are closing. Opportunity is really limiting. They have won 3 of their last 4, but they've also won 3 of their last 5. They've also won 4 of their last 7. They're just playing basically 500 ball right now, and that's just not going to cut it. Astros are doing a good job kind of opening up their lead in the West. It's up to 4.5 games. Wild card is still technically in play. I believe the Mariners are 2.5 games back from the Twins right now for that third wild card spot.
I'll have to look. So we're recording this just for transparency at like 9 p.m. on Wednesday night. So some of the games finished. I think when I looked last time, it was 3. So yeah, it's 2.5 now. And if the Astros lost today, then it is 4.5. So it's definitely there's still a window there. 2.5 games is not a ton, but it's also significant when you have a week and a half left of the season.
Yeah, there's 11 games left to play on the Mariners' schedule to hit that 162 mark. And they're going to have to go probably 8-3 over those 11 if they want a chance to snag that wild card. Twins are playing good baseball right now. And the fact of the matter is going 6-5 is not going to cut it. That's not going to get us there. So
no.
As encouraging as that Rangers series, I guess, could be, the larger sample size is still too discouraging. That first loss yesterday against the Yankees was brutal. We're currently down 1-0 in the second as we're recording this. So that Yankee series is not looking great. And then we also play the Astros 3 times in what's going to be a big series for them to try to, cement their position. So that's not going to be a cakewalk for us. I'm not feeling optimistic about our chances of climbing out of this.
Yeah, I think they need a win for their next 5. They already had that first loss to the Yankees, and in this 6-game stretch here, they need to win at least 2 against the Astros. They need to take at least 1 game just to further that lead, and also they just need to be winning because, like we said, we don't think that there's really a chance that they can catch the Astros unless they just plummet into nothingness.
Yeah.
The Astros are going to win the AL West. Like, that's just how it's going to be right now, and it's hard to see it any other way. If we lose 2 of those games against them, that just kind of further cements it. That's kind of it. Yeah.
That's it. If we lose 2 or 3, that is it. If we get a 3-game sweep of them, there's a chance. Like, that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. And if we lose to the Yankees tonight, I'm calling DOA. I think it's over. So we'll see. I know you've got a couple floaters and flounders you wanted to discuss. I'm I didn't do my research. I didn't come to the table prepared because I'm kind of how I was with the Sounders a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think one thing that I want to talk about is George Kirby's start from, I think that was the Rangers game. It was basically right after we talked last week.
Yes.
And he, I think, went 7 and gave up 0 runs. It's just every time we talk about any of these players.
Every time, dude. It's honestly ridiculous. But once again, not a shocker to either of us. Both of us still really love and respect George. His problem has been consistency on the year. But great to see a great start out of him.
Yeah. I've loved what I've seen from Kirby, and I almost thought about in my floaters and flounders, bringing up just talking trash about two guys, even if they were doing well. I really thought about just talking trash about them to see if they could perform.
Talk shit, why not?
But yeah, so as it stands, they're currently down 1-0, and it is looking a little rough for them. But let's talk about Logan Gilbert, because Logan Gilbert, as a guy, as a pitcher, as a person, we all love him. The Mariners fans love him. We talked a couple of weeks ago about how much the Mariners organization loves Logan Gilbert, and between, I think, all of the players or all of the pitchers in this starting rotation, he is the most untouchable, I think. Is there a question mark there?
There is absolutely no question mark there. Between Castillo and Kirby, the conversation starts to get interesting, but there is a clear and away number one guy in this pitching staff, and that is Logan Gilbert.
Yeah, and I think you've said it previously. It comes from his frame, the way he's built. He is just kind of
attitude,
a pitching,
everything.
Yeah, attitude. The way he goes about his business. The Mariners love everything about this guy, and he's going to be doing this in the major leagues for quite a long time. So
I want them to lock him down on like a Julio style contract. Like, I want to know that we are going to get 5 more years of Julio and Gilbert. Like, that's important to me. Like, Kirby, Castillo, there are conversations to be had there, but Gilbert, like, I want him and I want him locked.
Definitely. I'm in the same boat. I think Gilbert, as it stands right now, he's had a little bit of a rough month of September, but when I say that, he's got an ERA of 4.5, and he had 2 starts where he gave up 4 runs. Mm-hmm. So we can call this a little bit of a floundering segment. We'll do that just to give him a little push towards the end of the season.
Sure, he's gonna give up 0 through 8 innings if we call him out. So might as well. Yeah, when your floundering is 4.5 ERA, you're a really, really good pitcher, and he is.
Yeah. And over that time, his whip has actually gone down. Like, it was 0.9, and now it's 0.89. Like, he's had an unfortunate stint here. Some things that Logan Gilbert probably could improve on, and what we've seen over the course of the season is just his struggles with the long ball. I think that is something that, as a high velocity guy with the angle of approach that his ball comes in at, it's really easy for players to get good backspin and get just like nice launch angles on his pitches. So there's stuff for him to work on, but I think as a pitcher, he's probably one of the most complete guys, and he's really put together like a top 5 Cy Young caliber season in the AL. Like, he's not going to win the Cy Young. Tariq Skubal's been awesome this year. I think he's got an ERA sub 3 and has just been cruising. I think he's on pace for like 18 wins. Like, Tariq Skubal's been insane.
Yeah.
But Logan Gilbert is in the top 10 in a lot of pitching stats in Major League Baseball. It's not even just the AL. It's just like he is one of the top 10 pitchers, I think, in the league right now.
Yeah, his stats are nasty, and when you watch it, you see it.
Yeah, you look at his baseball savant, he's all red. It's just good stuff from Logan Gilbert. And so we wanted to shout him out here in case we end up diverting from the floating and floundering as the season comes to a close, because, to be honest, we're a little skeptical about this Mariners team.
My interest in following this team closely is definitely floundering, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
as football really starts to open up, I find myself with less love to give to a mediocre Mariners squad.
For sure. Next week we might not even talk about the floaters and flounderers. You know, that's going to be post Yankees and Astros series.
We'll know.
And
we'll know.
We'll know. We'll give you the update. We'll say, hey, the Mariners are dead, or they have a chance. And if they have a chance, we might give you our floaters and flounderers. But at that point, we'll probably be looking at how's this playoff push going to end. You know. Yeah. So we wanted to shout out Logan Gilbert while we're here.
Mm-hmm. I think honestly, of every player on this entire roster, he is the only guy that has truly, him and Bryce are the only guys on this roster that have truly exceeded my expectations for them for the season. There's not a single other guy on this roster that hasn't met or come short of what I expected from them, other than, Josh Rojas and some, lower level guys. Those are the two. Those are the two that really showed up.
Yeah, I think to that point, I think a lot of the players have underperformed. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get into that postseason, whether that's, after the playoffs if we make it or if we don't make it. We'll for sure do some superlatives and stuff like that. But for now, it's definitely Logan and Bryce have been really good bright spots. I think, like you said, Josh Rojas. Let's talk about my other floater, I think. And he's actually been a little bit of a flounderer in the last few games, but Cal Raleigh, over this most recent stretch, the Mariners' offense has exploded a little bit. They've been scoring runs at one of the highest clips in all Major League Baseball, and a lot of that was due to Cal Raleigh. And at least, prior to, I guess, this Texas series, prior to the Texas series, he was on a tear. And I just wanted to shout him out. He's been kind of the rock of this roster. He plays basically every day, whether that's catcher or DH, and so he's been just kind of the guy, and Cal Raleigh deserves a shout-out, even though he's batting .211 right now. And that's John's least favorite stat about him.
It absolutely kills me. But the one thing I will say is that he has been bringing that .211 basically every month all year, which he's the only guy on this roster that hasn't seemed to really fluctuate in terms of his batting performance month to month. We've had guys, like Rojas, who have had some incredible months and some abysmal months. And Cal, and I guess to a certain degree, Victor Robles, are kind of on offense, the two guys that have, kind of just brought it month to month. His slugging has really been present throughout the entire season. The guy, he's up to 34 home runs at this point? 32 home runs?
30. He's still sitting at 30. He's had a little bit of a quiet stretch, but yeah, he's,
sure.
A 30 home run season is amazing for a catcher. That's, I think he's got the most home runs for a catcher by a decent margin this season already.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. And he's really been bringing that over the course of the year. He had kind of a slow start to the year, but then since then it's been something that he's consistently contributed to this offense, and we've desperately needed it. So good shout out. I think if I had to pick two guys to walk away from this season thinking, yeah, those two guys were awesome, it'd probably be Logan and Cal.
Yeah. And one other thing I just wanted to point out, statistically, Cal in September is hitting .265 with a .406 on base and a .510 slugging for a .916 OPS. Like, the guy's he's just been good.
Give it to me. Give it to me, Cal. Why can't you do that every month? .265.
So, yeah, his average has increased by 7 points, which is really not that much, but it's a decent chunk to be this late in the season and still be rising that much over a few weeks.
Yeah, it was a great month.
Just wanted to talk Cal Raleigh because we might not get a chance to, man. This team is making me sad, and I don't want to talk about them a lot.
Next time we're talking Mariners, it'll probably be some post-mortem stuff. Or we'll be wildly surprised. I mean, God knows every time we say something, we're wrong. So I'm glad we're being as dismal as we are. That's enough on the Mariners. We'll check in next week, and we will know some things for sure when that time comes. Or at least be looking down the barrel of a very interesting athletic series. Maybe all three of those will get us a wild card, but we will wait and we will see. Touching on a couple of these other sports before we get into football, which there's going to be a lot of discussion to be had. Seattle, I guess that's not very helpful. We're a Seattle-based sports podcast. If I say Seattle 1-2-0, that's not very helpful. The Seattle Sounders beat Kansas City 2-0 in Sunday's match. It was a good game. It was that was almost bad. Rothrock and Reagan, who scored our 2 goals in the 19th and 39th minute. We kind of jumped on them early and then just controlled the ball, which is, a recipe for this team to succeed. And, it's worth noting, we've talked a lot about this Sounders squad, and we've been pessimistic at times, but, here they are. They're finding themselves in 5th place, and they are 1.5 points out of 3rd place. They're at 46 points on the season. Colorado in 3rd is at 47 points. Obviously not a ton of time left. They have, 2, 4, 5 more games in the regular season. But this is a team that could hypothetically climb as high as 3rd in the Western Conference.
I'll tell you what's crazier, John. LAFC's at 48 points. They're 2.5 games out of 2nd place.
I don't even want to think about getting up to LAFC, man. As far as I'm concerned, I'm never talking about LAFC and the Sounders in the same sentence. I'm not doing it.
They could get that 2 spot, which would put them very comfortably playing. I think that would be the Dynamo. which I just want to point out the Sounders. There's potential there for them to keep climbing. I think that the Galaxy are far and away going to win that number 1 spot. But after this Sounders team started, I think it was like 2-5-5. Like they were bad early on. They're 13-7-9.
Yeah, they didn't win their first match for a long time. But yeah, 3 of their last 4. Tough to see that 1-0 loss to Portland in the rivalry game. But 3 of their last 4, if they can string together a couple more, it's not the highest level of competition to end the season. I believe the highest ranked team we're going to play is Colorado, October 5th. So there's some opportunity here. And, we did call them dead just based on their inability to beat top level teams. But in terms of, potential playoff seeding, they are certainly not dead.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they could do. This team, once they get into the playoffs, have been super consistent with just their ability to get into the semis. I think they switched coaches this offseason, but I feel like they've just been one of those teams that's just stuck around and has the longevity with their players and their core to make it once they get to that playoff atmosphere.
Yeah, 100%. And, we will see. We will see when that time comes.
Yep.
Moving on to the Seattle Storm, they've had a nice little stretch here. 83-81 win over the Wings on the 13th. They beat the Sparks 90-87 this last Sunday, and yesterday a 85-72 loss to the Las Vegas Aces. Worth noting that Ezi Magbagor and Jewel Lloyd have not played the last 2 games as they deal with minor injuries. Part of the reasoning behind those two might also be that for these last 3 games, the seeding for the playoff has been all but set. So there hasn't necessarily been a ton to gain by pushing anybody. Better to let them rest if they're, got some nagging issues. So that Aces loss, we're going to talk a lot about the Aces here in a second. And I'm just going to say now the reason that I'm not putting too much weight on this last loss is that they're missing 2 of their 5 best players, including arguably their best. So that 85-72 loss, I'm not going to sweat too much over. Before we talk playoffs, I just wanted to shout out Gabby Williams, guard who's stepped in. Obviously, she's had a bench role for us, but she stepped in for Jewel Lloyd missing time, and she has been excellent. She's dropped 20-plus points in the last 2 games to try and help buoy this offense. Really nice to see. It kind of has me wishing she would have gotten some more run off the bench this season, but at the very least, thanks for filling in. We have the playoff seeding as far as the Storm are concerned. We are going to be the 5 seed in the WNBA playoffs. For those who don't remember or know how it works, the WNBA just seeds 8 teams combining both conferences and plays those out. So we are the 5 seed, even though we're locked into the 3 seed in the West. And that matches us up with the number 4 seed, Las Vegas Aces. Tyler, what do you think about that? Tell me what you think about that.
That's a tough one. I will say, as a playoff matchup, the Storm are 1-3 against the Aces all season, and even if you discount the loss, whenever that was, the most recent game, they still haven't been super competitive against the Aces. Their one win was earlier in the season, not necessarily recently. And the Aces have just kind of had their way scoring wise. Like their losses, I need to look at all of them, but their losses have been by 10 or more points, I think, in all 3 of their losses so far.
Yeah, we haven't beaten the Aces since June 7th. And then they beat us by 11 on the 19th of June and 5 on the 10th of July before this last game, which I'm kind of throwing out. So they have won the last 2. But when we beat them, our defense played really well, and we beat them 78-65. So we got them pretty good when we did get our one lick in.
That was also early in the season, and the Aces were not good early in the season. They had kind of a comeback.
They had to kind of get
I think it was kind of the first month. They had to figure out what they were going to do, and then after that, they've been on a tear, shooting up to second in the ranking or in the Western Conference. So the Aces are a very good team.
There are a lot of people's favorites to win the championship this year, despite being the 2 seed in the West behind the Lynx. But not a great draw. Not a great draw from the Storm. Not what I was hoping to see.
Vegas is a very good 4 seed.
Yeah, better than the Liberty. I'd rather play the Aces than the Liberty, I'll tell you what. Not a ton else to say on that. We're just going to have to see it. Hopefully we can get healthy. Hopefully we can do a little game planning. Worth noting, I really think in a series like that, our depth, comes to our benefit. Being able to game plan against Kelsey Plum and Asia Wilson, despite obviously how Asia's probably the MVP. Like she, it's as impossible to game plan against as there is. But when you can focus on 1 or 2 players, I think it's easier than when you really have to focus on 4 or 5 players like you do with the Storm. I'm hoping that over the course of the series, you see that play out. But ultimately, we're going to have to go through the team a lot of people think are the best team in the WNBA to get to the second round. So it's going to be a heck of a challenge.
Yeah, going to be a tough one for sure. All right, you ready to move on into some college football?
Please.
We only have one game to talk about that happened last week because the 2 teams that we usually talk about played each other. And let me tell you, that was one of the more exciting games, even if I was not the winner of that game, I guess, if you will. I'm a Husky at heart, and so them losing to the Cougs 24-19, a tough game to close out their kind of Pac-12 series against each other. I'm sure that'll still happen in the future, but the schedule is going to change. It's going to be a whole different thing. That loss, as a Husky fan, that loss was hard to take in. Jonah Coleman had a really kind of soft game. 14 carries for 75 yards. Not soft in his play, but just didn't do much. I was expecting more from him as a running back. We did hold Mateer to 16 carries for 62 yards. He scored 2 touchdowns, but he had, I think 20 of those came on one play where there was one breakdown defensively and he scored off that. But I think in general, Mateer did well, but the Huskies had a chance at the end of the game. I think we should talk about that first and foremost.
There's a lot to talk about with Mateer, a lot to talk about with the Huskies, but this was a game, it's worth noting, it was very back and forth through the first couple of quarters. There was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lead changes entering the third quarter, and that's when Wazoo was able to separate a little bit, but going into the fourth quarter, they were up 5 points. This game was anybody's to be had. And then a scoreless fourth quarter as both teams back and forth failed to deliver on crucial drives. Yeah, just give me your thoughts. I watched it closely. I watched the first half more closely than the second. So kind of walk me through your thoughts on how this game ended and where UW missed its chance to try and get back into this one.
Yeah, I think, they had the ball. I think it was with 2 minutes left or whatever. They got what should have been one of the last possessions, and then the Cougars might have gotten the ball with 30 seconds or something. But they had got the ball, drove down the field, and they were within the 10-yard line for 4 plays, basically. They had 4 downs because it was fourth down territory. You can't kick a field goal down 5. And I think they get stuffed on the first play. Second play, they get some yardage. And then the third play, Denzel Boston has a nice reception that looks like he could turn it upfield, and he kind of lightly walks it into the sideline because he just gets pushed and can't turn fully around. And then they run this awful in my opinion, we could talk about whether it was awful, but in my opinion, an awful fourth down call where they rush it short side with Will Rogers, and he has the option to toss it back to Jonah Coleman to see if he can gain any yards if he gets stopped. If you're going to run that play, run it to the long side. There's so much more field to work with. They basically got stuffed by the sideline. They created their own box. It's kind of like what you do on defense in basketball. It's use the sideline to your advantage, and that's kind of what they did. They just rushed people in a line towards the sideline, and the Huskies were not able to get anything. I think they lost 2 yards on the play. A tough call there by Fish. I think there was some discussion about this kind of team is. You don't want to bring up that type of play this late in the game. If you're going to do that, don't do it with Will Rogers. Do it with a guy who's been doing that in Williams all 2 games of the season so far, and he's a more mobile quarterback. There was a lot of things that went wrong with that last drive, and I think UW fans have kind of a sour taste in their mouth because of that.
Sure. And this is a kind of a fascinating game to look at. It was a fun watch, but when you look at the game stats, some of it's just kind of surprising. Where UW controlled time of possession, won in total yards by almost 100 yards. 10 more penalties, 16 penalties, really hurting themselves both offensively and defensively to not, get Wazoo off the field and then also to keep sustaining drives. They were really struggling, really need to clean that up. Another huge thing looking at it, return yards. Wazoo, 192 return yards over the course of the game. UW, 25. UW was just fair catching all game. A couple times they did try to do anything with it. They didn't get anywhere. Part of that, I guess, credit goes to Wazoo and their punter for just kind of forcing those situations, but their special teams was a lot more dynamic than UW's were. It's also worth noting, this is a UW offense you expect to generate more than 19 points. And when you look at, the box score, the way some of these guys were performing, you'd be surprised that they only generated 19 points. Will Rogers, 23 of 31, 74% pass completion rate for 300 yards and a touchdown. That's a good game. His QBR was 126. That's a good quarterback game. Obviously, his rushing game was terrible. 6 attempts for negative 11 yards. Wasn't doing anything there. But in the pocket, he was being very effective. Jonah Coleman, 14 attempts, 75 yards. It's 5 yards a pop, man. That's a good game for a running back. Probably should have gotten more carries. So I just, other than the penalties and some timely poor decisions by the coaching staff, what was it that led to this team scoring only 19 points? Or is it just that simple?
I think what you see there is they were playing a long field every time they got the ball, it felt like. Like, Wazoo would drive to whatever it was, the 40 or 50-yard line, and they would punt it away, and, that's how we didn't have any returning yards. They'd punt it away, and they'd be able to lock us inside the 10, and we just had to work and grind for those yards. So you see, a decent amount of statistical, like you see a lot of yards, a decent amount of completions and attempts and carries and everything, but at the end of the day, you're going down the field and you're getting field goals, and that's just not enough against this Washington State team that was able to score 3 times.
Yeah.
Washington only has 19 points.
Yeah, that is, I think, the other part of this discussion we need to have, and this is where I'm going to turn off the somber mood a little bit because, while we're both a little biased, you maybe even a little more than me, but I'm still a west side of the Cascades guy. Typically find myself rooting for UW during the Apple Cup. I got to be honest, by the end of the second quarter, I was low-key kind of rooting for Wazoo. Not just because, they've had kind of a losing streak in the Apple Cup recently, and I like parity in my rivalries, but also because this kid, John Mateer, is just, reaching into my chest and, pumping my heart for me. It's unbelievable. The things that this guy can do. Now, he didn't have the craziest game of all time, but, 17 of 34, 50% completion for 245. He also threw a pick. So, looking at that, you'd say worse than Will Rogers. 16 for 62, doesn't look great, but that's 14 attempts for 16 yards. 14 attempts for 16 yards, awful. Great job by the UW defense. 2 attempts for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 2 of the just awesome, just amazing plays to generate touchdowns in the first half with his legs. He had a 23-yard scamper in the first quarter to take back the lead after that nice... Yeah, UW had an amazing drive down the field on their first possession. Will Rogers to Giles Jackson, 31-yard touchdown. And it looked like, okay, maybe UW's going to run away with this thing. Then Mateer does it with his legs, 23 yards, looks amazing. That was a little bit more of a broken play, but, it was still a really nice run. And then at the end of the second quarter, UW's just kicked 2 field goals to take a 13-10 lead. 20 seconds left in the second quarter. I believe it was 3rd and 14, 3rd and 16. They'd gotten backed up on an offensive holding call on 3rd down. 20 seconds left. John Mateer's in the pocket. UW's pass rush breaks through. He rolls out to his left, and then he's taken off down the sidelines, and you're just waiting for a UW defender to get into the screen. And before you know it, he's diving for the goalpost and hitting it for a 25-yard touchdown. 20 seconds left in the half, and that was an electric play. And it can't be overstated. Those are two 25-yard runs from your quarterback that completely change the game in terms of momentum and what your offense is doing, because both of those drives would have stalled out and ended in field goals if he didn't step up and do those things with his legs. I know I'm rambling here, but
you're good. I'm
not sure I can get enough of this John Mateer guy.
I think, well, that leads into UW's defense. They did a good job this game. Like they held him to 62 yards. Those 2 touchdowns were on broken plays where the pass rush got kind of like a little too aggressive to one side. Their whole goal, and that happened after the first quarter, their whole goal was to kind of contain him in the pocket, make sure he couldn't run outside of the pass rush.
Correct.
And that just didn't happen on those 2 broken plays. Like they went inside, and he was able to escape out the ends and scamper.
And isn't that crazy? Because they did it so effectively. He had 14 carries for like 12 yards. If you exclude those, they did a great job forcing him in contain. But you mess up twice, and he can just burn you both times.
Yeah, I mean that's just awesome play by him. Like it just shows his athletic ability and his decision making. I think even his quarterbacking, like his actual passing of the ball and decision making, wasn't awesome in that aspect. 17 for 34. He had a couple plays that should have been interceptions, and UW didn't come up with them. And their one interception was an awesome one, and that was a question last week that we had about this UW secondary and their ability to turn over a guy who is a better quarterback than who they've played so far.
Sure.
And they were able to get a turnover and do a lot of things, this defense, in that second half. Like we said, it could stall out, and it did because this team was good in the second half. They created the turnover in the fourth and got their offense the opportunity to score twice with the turnover, and then a turnover on downs or a punt. Yeah. The offense wasn't able to convert, and I think that comes down to offensive play calling. Like, this team's talent is there. I don't think there's a question about that. Will Rogers is not a top 5 quarterback in college football, but he's capable of running this offense and scoring 35 points a game. Like, that's just who Will Rogers is as a quarterback and a passer.
He's like a college like Peyton Manning. Like, this is I'm really trying to say that in that, like, he just is a guy that has a great understanding and great control over the college game. Like, this guy, Will Rogers, could play at any school in the country. This guy would play for Alabama and would be a great quarterback for Alabama. Like, he's not the ceiling raiser that like a Jalen Milroe is, obviously, but he is like the ultimate floor raiser in terms of quarterback. Like, I really, really like Will Rogers.
Yeah. No, and he had a good game, and I think that's what it comes down to, is just like the decision making on the offensive side of the ball in terms of plays. Like, they just weren't very good.
Yeah.
You see Denzel Boston had 8 receptions for 58 yards. I think he's one of the guys that really needs to prove it to me, and this receiving core really needs to prove it to me, because Giles Jackson had 8 receptions for 162 yards. He had an awesome game. The rest of these guys didn't break 60. Like, Will Rogers was just throwing it to Giles Jackson because that's the only guy he had, and Denzel Boston anytime he needed a check down. Yeah. But I think the scheme just didn't work because it was either Giles Jackson or nothing. And I think Will Rogers, as a quarterback, needs options. He can't just be relying on one guy to get open deep and then checking it down, because we don't have that explosive short play playmaker to get us 15 yards off a screen. That's just not who we have offensively. Yeah. So it was tough to watch, in my opinion.
We're missing some of that speed from last year. We had a lot of speed on the offense last year, and we got some really solid players, but we're a little short on speed. Yeah, Jeremiah Hunter, not as involved as we were hoping he would be coming off that last game. Yeah, Denzel Boston, honestly, part of that's on him. I know he wasn't getting the ball in the best situations, but if you get 8 receptions, you got to turn that into more than 60 yards, my guy. Like, part of that is just yards after catch ability, and I wasn't super impressed with what I saw from him. Yeah, Decker DeGraff, who we've been talking about as kind of an X factor on this team, caught 1 deep pass, but wasn't much of a factor. So all of that, yeah, frustrating. Part of it is it's definitely play calling. I'm with you 100%. When you look at how well some of these guys executed when given the opportunity, you have to point to the coaching. I think a big part of that is not leaning on Jonah Coleman enough.
I agree with that, yeah.
I really like this kid. 14 attempts, not enough when this guy's averaging 5 yards a pop. Adam Muhammad seemed to have a good, he did a good job with his 3 attempts, but I don't know why Cam Davis is getting so many I don't know why Will Rogers had as many design quarterback runs as he did. I I want to see the ball in Jonah Coleman's hands more. I want to see it in our running backs' hands more. Try to wear down some of these defenses that we play. Not scoring in that fourth quarter against this Wazoo defense when the UW defense is doing their job and giving you the opportunity, that's unacceptable. And I also, whether you're pointing to Fish or who's our new OC, help me out.
Oh, I don't remember. I think Fish is actually making the play calls, so I think there's nobody really.
We can
else
point
to
to Fish. Yeah, we can go ahead and point to Fish. And I like him a lot. Obviously, a lot of change going on in this program, but not scoring down the stretch there. There was a golden opportunity. Yeah, UW scored one touchdown this entire game in the first quarter, and then on their first drive, on their first time with the ball.
Yeah, and I think what that came down to too was Wazoo was ahead. We talk about it all the time. You have to pass when you're coming from behind. Wazoo was just ahead, and we couldn't run the ball. Like that was just kind of the rule. But you're that early in the game, you don't have to sit there and pass the entire time.
Correct.
You can run the ball and take chunk plays and do what you got to do. So, tough to see on the offense. I think there was a few plays we'll look at with a little bit of disgust as we think about the Apple Cup going forward. But, tough look for the Huskies. And they go into Week 4, 2-1, and I'm not as confident in them as an 8-4 team. Looking at this Big Ten schedule, I'm a little more terrified now that we've lost to Washington State. Maybe Washington State's really good. We don't know. But I'm a little more terrified of this Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, and I think there's got to be a larger discussion had there. I'm curious to see how the rest of UW season goes because I think there's a chance that Wazoo's just better than we think they are, particularly offensively. Defensively, I don't think there's something special, and this offense needs to work out some kinks. But I think this offense can. I think Wazoo might be a little more special than they're getting credit for. Let's talk what's coming next. Wazoo 3-0. Starting to make a case for themselves as a top 25 team. They're going to have to keep doing it. They're going to have to beat Boise State later this year. They're going to have to beat San Diego State later this year. But they might have a chance at creeping up into the top 25. And if they win the Pac-12, I think currently they are projected as having like a 40 or 50% chance of making the college football playoff right now.
That would be awesome.
Remember, 12-team playoff. And I believe the Pac-12 is going to get a representative as long as one of the two teams is fairly deserving between Washington State and Oregon State. So if Wazoo can, finish 10-2 this year, there's a real chance we see them playing playoff college football, which is wild. But that's on the table. They have San Jose State coming up this Friday. Should be a very winnable game. Current win probability is about 80% for the Cougars playing at home. I want to see them take care of business. I want to see their offense put up 30-plus points. I want to see Mateer be dynamic. Those are the things I'm looking for.
Yeah, you see San Jose State's quarterback, they're kind of an all-passing offense. They've got 900 yards passing with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Like, their quarterback's been very good. Can't speak to their level of opponent yet, but I think it's going to be a shootout. I think I could see this game going to the wire as a shootout. Wazoo's -12, so I think the committee or whoever's ranking or creating these ESPN bets or whatever it is
the committee, the Vegas committee.
Vegas, yeah. I got ahead of myself. We were talking CFP,
Yeah, there's probably a committee somewhere. We just don't know about them.
But yeah, Wazoo was they started out -14. It's now down to -12. People have been hammering that line. People believe in this Washington State team. We'll see. I'm excited. They've got a better running game too than the San Jose State. And if they keep showing out, I think if they win this week, they will probably crack into the top 25.
Yeah, stay undefeated long enough. A lot of teams are falling. Next up for UW, now 2-1, not where they want to be, but now's when you really have to kick it up as Big Ten play kicks off. We've got Northwestern this Saturday, the 21st, 4 p.m. game. That'll be fun. Tell me your thoughts on this matchup with Northwestern.
Northwestern, I think it's kind of an easy game for UW, if I'm being honest. They don't pass super well. They don't run the ball super well. If you look at their highest passing yards, it's 38 for 66 completions with 354 yards and 1 interception. They just don't have much of a passing offense. And rushing-wise, they don't have as much of a rushing offense as UW does. I think offensively, this is where we can shine. The spread's 10.5 in Washington's favor. I think this is a game where we reset, regroup, and get back into this Big Ten play. The Apple Cup is always kind of a weird game. I think having it as the third game of the season, if we think about it, it's the last game usually when they're playing after Thanksgiving. But at the third week of the season, it kind of threw off our groove a little bit.
A lot of emotion.
I think we can get back into it and be totally solid after this Northwestern game.
Understood. Yeah, I agree. I think the line's a little generous to UW. It's just, that's a lot of points. I'd love to see it at like,
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, love to see it at like 6.5. I feel more comfortable hitting that. But regardless, we're better than this Northwestern team. This is a Northwestern team that's also 2-1, but they lost to Duke, who is not on par with Wazoo. This is a team that put up 13 points against Miami, not the one in Florida, the one in Ohio. So I think our defense should hopefully be able to continue to polish itself against this Northwestern team, and I want to see our offense get back on track. This is a Big Ten defense. It's the first one we're going to play, but they're as real as most teams in the Pac-12 last year. So I want to see what Will Rogers can do. I want to see him stay efficient. I want to see the running game become a bigger part of this, because I think that's the formula: is efficient quarterback play and a dynamic running game.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly there. I think this team has a good chance here to just build, and efficient running game is going to be huge. I think Jonah Coleman could be one of the better running backs in the Big Ten. So I think relying on him more than they did, and granted, the Washington had to hold one of the more dynamic playmakers down in Mateer against this Washington State team. Northwestern does not have a guy like that. We don't have to worry as much. We don't have to game plan around a specific player.
Sure.
It's going to be much more cookie cutter defense, which I think benefits young college guys.
Well, yeah, and it benefits mediocre defenses too. Having to scheme against a guy like Mateer. We talked about this last week, and especially after this last week, I'm standing on it. Mateer is not the best quarterback in college football. He's not. Probably not top 5, probably not top 10. But he is on the short list of the most dynamic guys in college football. I trust him running the football almost as much as a guy like Milroe, and I trust him throwing the football deep down the field a heck of a lot more than I trust Jalen Milroe. So this is a guy that can do a lot of things on the football field. I'm sure the defense will be excited for this Northwestern matchup. Okay, before we move on, any thoughts on that 10.5 line for UW?
We gotta do our weekly. Does UW cover? And I think they do. I think they come out this week and they're just trying to hurt some people. I think they're trying to win this game by 21 points and put this Washington State game in the rearview mirror. So I like the minus 10.5 line.
I like the optimism. I think I'm taking plus 10.5 there. I think
you have not bet on the UW once this season.
Have they covered once this season?
They covered once.
They did.
They covered once.
But it's just, this is the first Big Ten game, man. I think it's going to be, I think offensively it's going to be a bit of a wake-up call against this Northwestern defense. I think the defense will look good, but, I'm seeing a nice, 22 to 13 win. It's going to be a good win, but 10.5 is a lot of points.
We'll see. Like you said, they only scored 13 points against Miami, Ohio, so I think UW can score 28.
That's fair.
And be comfortable.
Fair. Okay, moving on to the pros. Break it down for us.
Yes, so last week the Seahawks had an exciting game against the Patriots. They win 23-20 in overtime. Kind of just a wild game in general. I was shocked that game. I was 100% certain the Seahawks were going to lose, and then I was 100% certain the Seahawks were going to win, and then I was neither, and we ended up winning, which is kind of the experience of being a Seahawks fan. It was just an exciting game, I think. Do you want to talk more about it?
Sure. I guess first thing, got to do it. So par for the course. So ridiculous. Called out Geno Smith last week, was calling for the Sam Howell call up.
I wanted to make you say it, by the way.
Yeah. And he had honestly one of his better games as a Seahawk, in my opinion. 33 of 44, 75% completion percentage, which is awesome. For 327 and a touchdown. He was just very efficient. This was ultimate Geno in terms of what we want from him, in terms of hyper efficient, no mistakes. Like, I think what we expect is a similar game to this with maybe 240 yards passing and a touchdown and no picks. But he was able to be a little bit more dynamic, pushing the ball down the field. Obviously, big pass to DK Metcalf, 56-yard touchdown to get the Hawks back in this one. But I was very impressed by Geno Smith. Especially with, injuries at running back, Charbonnet taking over the starting job this week, and he did not necessarily steal the starting job. I think that's going to be...
No, he did not.
It's going to be sitting there for Kenneth Walker when he comes back. So it was all the more important that Geno show up the way he did, and he showed up. So shout out to him. 2 other shout outs. I think shout out to Tyler Lockett. He had a nice game, I think, week 1, and we thought maybe he'd hold on to it for another year, but I'm hearing swans. The swan songs are coming in strong. He had 2 receptions, 15 yards, becoming just less an important part of this offense. And as he has set like the sun on a winter day, rising in the east has been Jackson Smith and Jigba filling that role. I think it's fair to say this was his best game as a pro. 12 receptions for 120 yards receiving. He was
definitely
excellent. What did you see from him?
I just saw what we expected last year. I think as things played out, I think he's more of the slot guy where he gets the short passes for little chunk plays. His long was 24 yards. That just means he was consistently getting 10 yards on his catches.
Absolutely.
The guy's creating. I think. Tyler Lockett, like you said, is kind of past his prime. His thing was broken plays, and I don't think he's got the speed to get free on those types of plays anymore. So those have turned into more of the JSN type opportunities as well, which was nice. Both JSN and DK having over 115 yards receiving last game was awesome to see. I think that showed progress on the offensive side of the ball, specifically from Ryan Grubb. That's a good offensive coordinator reading into what's going to happen this week with no Kenneth Walker and saying, okay, how are we going to win this game? It's with our 2 bigger playmakers and Geno getting the ball to them and them trying to get things going with yards after catch, things like that. So I think overall we looked really solid offensively with Walker out and Tyler Lockett not having a huge piece or role to play in the offense. So Charbonnet, 5 catches for 31 yards is a good note. I think he's more of the receiving type back, and he, like we've said it a million times, he slots really well into that running back 2 spot. So without Walker, he kind of got exposed a little bit. 14 carries for 38 yards is not good.
More of a goal line guy, yeah.
Yeah. So really relied heavily on Geno, and I was very happy with what we saw. Big game from him.
Yeah, defensively, this game was interesting because the Patriots have one of the more unique schemes in the NFL. Jacoby Brissett, 15 for 27 for $149 passing. They just do not pass the ball. When they pass the ball, they pass it short. Hunter Henry, their tight end, was responsible for 109 of their 149 yards. So obviously, just a lot of short checkdowns to the tight end. And they just absolutely attacked with the ground game. 32 combined carries between Antonio Gibson and Ramondre Stevenson for 174 yards, if my math's right there. They were kind of dicing up this defense on the ground. What are your thoughts? My frustrations kind of just looking at this is, the Seahawks defense held the Pats to 20 points. They generated 3 sacks, no turnovers. Obviously, hard to generate turnovers when they're just running the ball on you nonstop. But at the same time, when an offense is as predictable and lacking dynamicism, the way that this Patriots team does, you have to be able to stop them. Like, how do you allow 20 points to a team that you can basically call the play before it happens? How many runs to the right can an offense run before you stop them in 3 plays?
It's, in my mind, that's just a tough thing to do with the way that the game is played right now. Football relies so heavily on the passing game, and to really sell out in the running game means you're very susceptible to a play action pass or something like that. So I think the Seahawks played it safe generally, I think is what I would call that. Not trying too hard. I'm sure that they knew coming into this week that it was going to be a lot of Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. It's not like they came in scared of Jacoby Brissett throwing deep balls to Jalen Polk, So I think
hey, shout out to Jalen Polk. First
shout out Jalen
touchdown.
Polk. I did want to point that one out. But yeah, I just think it was the Seahawks being simple about it. I think Mike Macdonald can have his complex games where he has to worry about a dual threat guy like Lamar Jackson eventually. But right now they just had to get the job done. And granted, 20 points is more than I wanted to see from the defense this week, but it's exactly what we expect from the Seahawks as an organization. They should be able to score 23. This game going to overtime was a little surprising, and the fact that the Patriots almost won it, I think they won the coin toss. Just goes to show that like this team still has some points that they need to fine tune and figure out. But it's game 2 under a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, and we're 2-0. Like that's all I can say.
Hey, you know what? Well said. Let's not start throwing stones before we see something really wrong happen. And to be fair, this happened against the Bengals as well. The Patriots were just kind of moving the ball, and it's frustrating to watch because it's like, if I was playing somebody in Madden and they were playing the way this Patriots team were playing, I'd beat them by 70. But, there's a certain degree of just like, yeah, their right side of the offensive line is really good and their running backs are solid. And you can totally sell out on that if you want, but then you're going to give up more chunk plays. So I guess
that's what my dad used to say all the time. It was like, if you can just get 3 yards every single carry, why would you pass? Like it's like that's all they need to do, and 3 yards is not that hard when you have a good offensive line like the Patriots do.
No surprise, Gerard Mayo is a former defensive player. We'll leave it at that. I wonder what the odds were on Jalen Polk and McMillan both scoring touchdowns before Roma Dunze does. Their odds were probably, you could have gotten some nice money there, maybe a plus 10,000. Yeah, I'm curious. I would bet you, I'm not sure of this, but I would bet money that if Rome, and I am assuming he will, does score a touchdown this season, this would be the only season in the history of the NFL where 3 rookie wide receivers from the same school all score NFL touchdowns. I bet you that's never happened before.
We'll have to look into it. I'm sure that's a stat that they would show on SportsCenter, but
that sounds like something. Yeah, that sounds like something Prime Video would throw up there during a Thursday night game. All right, what's up next for the Seahawks? Who do we have in Week 3?
Well, real quick, I want to ask you where you think Geno Smith ranks in terms of total yards in all of quarterbacks. You last week talked about how Sam Howell, you were kind of calling for it a little early, and I told you that. But let's talk Geno's success.
I'll take that one on the chin. It's worth noting it's been 2 weeks, and he had a 300-yard game. So naturally, that's going to be a bit inflated, especially with how poor the quarterback play has been across the league. I'm going to say Geno Smith is 4th in total yards.
Wow. Giving him a little bit more props than I thought. He is 6th.
Okay. Yeah.
The key there, though, is he's only got the 1 interception. You've got Gardner Minshew sitting at 3rd, so definitely still early in the season.
Yeah, Derek Carr and what's his name? The Tampa Bay quarterback are both in the top
Baker Mayfield.
5. Baker Mayfield, my guy Baker.
It's what's crazy is they're not. Baker's 10 and Derek Carr is 13.
Oh, son of a gun. I thought that'd be up there.
Yeah, just weird statistically.
Gardner
Purdy
Minshew,
and Matthew Stafford are 1 and 2.
Go. Matt Stafford, horrible fantasy quarterback. Dropped him in a league. He's been trash.
Well, I need to drop him. I think I picked him in our league, but I was like, oh, he's going to have Puka and Cooper. So
and now he has neither.
Now I can get rid of him and put Caleb Williams in that second spot.
Too typical. All right, well, the next week we're matching up. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off? Did you want to say anything past Geno has had an excellent 2 weeks? Or are you just trying to rub my nose in my call?
Wanted to, put your nose in the dirt and make you sniff it,
He just slapped me on the face with the newspaper, and I can't argue with him about it.
Yes, the Seahawks Dolphins.
I do not think Geno's losing his starting job to Sam Howell this week. I'll leave it at that.
Good.
Seahawks Dolphins. This would have been a very good game. Unfortunately, Tua is just suffering a lot of traumatic brain injuries. Not even going to make a joke about it because it kind of just sucks. Yep. But that makes this game a whole lot less interesting with Skylar Thompson at the head. It's in Lumen Field. It's in Seattle. Tyreek Hill's always frightening, but I'm really not that worried about this game. I guess Devon Achane on the ground, you have to really pay attention to him. They can't allow this team to run the ball the way that the Patriots did because Devon Achane's one of the running backs where it's like, if you give him too many carries, he's going to rip off a couple 80-yarders. Like that's how they get their big plays is running the ball. So I'd much rather see the ball in Skylar Thompson's hands. I think the Hawks should get the job done. I don't know what the line is right now. I guess we'll talk about the line, but
yeah, we'll talk.
I think there's a really good chance of this being a pretty easy win. What do you think?
I, as much as I try to agree with you on a lot of your takes, man, this Seahawks team is like, this is the perfect storm of a team to come in and really disrupt this defense, I think. Mike McDonald will be able to prepare, I think, but it's tough to say when they've got Tyreek Hill, they've got Jalen Waddle, they've got A-Chain. Like, as an offense, I don't think you need Tua there for this offense to run. Like, obviously, he's one of the better deep ball throwers in the NFL, and it really sucks to see him go down and deal with all this stuff. But Skylar Thompson's gonna be good. Like, he's a solid backup, and I think this is one of those games where the defense has a breakdown or two, and the Dolphins can get some big chunk plays and maybe even some 50-yard touchdown type plays. I'm a little worried, and I think this is where you see the line come into play. Where the line right now is, it opened Seahawks -6.5, and this is faded now. And Miami's got a +4. My people have been hitting that 6.5 line because I think Miami has a chance to win. Now they scored 10 points. They scored 10 points last week against the Bills, and I think the Bills' defense is better than the Seahawks right now, but maybe they're not. Maybe the Miami's offense just hasn't really had it,
They
but
scored
this
10
is their
points
time.
with Tua playing most of the game.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's one of those weird things where it's like the Dolphins scare me enough that I would not necessarily bet the Seahawks -4 here,
Sure. I totally, and that's one of those scary lines because it's like, if the Hawks win, they could win big for sure. But like, yeah, I could also see Devon A-Chain having like a 75-yard touchdown and Tyreek Hill also having like a 75-yard touchdown. And then it's like, oh, yeah, maybe you win by 1 or maybe you lose. Like, those things can happen against this Dolphins team. But if I have a chance to bet against Skylar Thompson, I think I'm going to do it. So,
that's fair. I will say, if we have Walker coming in, I'm much more confident. He's still questionable for this week, and that is where the confidence can grow as a Seahawks fan.
An excellent point. Cannot overstate. He's really important. We really saw how much we need him. Charbonnet is not the guy, so that's a very, very good point. Because if we're having to rely too much on Geno, we've seen sometimes that Geno, doesn't necessarily show up every single time the way he has so far. All right, we're getting close to an hour here. Let's move on to the section everyone's been waiting for. Value dogs of the week. Value dogs.
Get ready for the TikTok, man. This is the time. I'm going to post a TikTok of our value dogs. See if we can get some fans.
Well, let's be sure to cut out our previous week before we start recording that little video for TikTok, because it was a nice one for you. 2-1 for you. Well done. I went 1-2. And it was the worst week to go 1-2 because I think the dogs were like 9-4 this last week. So it was really just me. It was just me that was getting these wrong.
Yeah, and that was because you tried to be different. Like I had the Bucks +7.5.
I wanted
that was a bold
Bucks.
take to try and take a different pick, man. Sometimes we just have to be all three the same. We could have both been 2-1.
We could have been 2-1 together. We could have been. But that Rams game was kind of messed up too.
Kind of wild. The +1 really threw me for a loop there. But Cooper Kupp getting injured, it just ruins everything. This Rams wide receiver core has ruined their spreads.
Marvin Harrison deciding to finally show up.
Yes.
But okay, value dogs for this week. I'm excited. Going to get it all back here. Going to get these all right.
You can go first. I will. I'm sure we have two of the same picks again this week, so you go first.
God damn it! I sure hope we don't. My first value dog of the week. I'm just going to try to be as biased to the previous week every single week to really maximize my own pain. And I'm
just really ride with what Vegas thinks.
Definitely. And I'm taking a team. I really like this line, to be honest. I'm taking the Patriots +6.5 against the New York Jets. I got bit last week betting against the Jets. My mistake. But this Patriots team is not the Tennessee Titans. Their offense does not generate turnovers. They literally design their offense to avoid turnovers. They methodically move the ball. They're not going to score a lot, but then their defense is really tough. And I still have the same questions, all the same questions about this Jets offense and their ability to generate yards and points. I think Aaron Rodgers going up against a really stout defense. We'll see how he holds up. Their offense is annoying and not very effective, but I bet you they'll put up 17 points against the Jets. I think that will be enough to cover plus 6.5. That's a lot of points.
Yeah, I have this line as well. I'm not going to divert from it.
Damn it! Okay.
It's also
right.
I think today when we release this, it's the Thursday night game, so we'll get the results here pretty quick. But yeah, I agree with you. Everything you said. I think the Jets are prone to some bigger running games, and the Patriots' running game is just better. You talked about specifically Tony Pollard being decent for the Titans, and the Titans even were okay last week. I think they lost 17-24, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and Will Levis made a couple more really horrible mistakes. Like that could have been a closer game than it was.
Yeah, but Tony Pollard is not as good as Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. So it's just like the Patriots will be able to run. Will the Jets be able to stop it? Who knows? Maybe it'll be very similar to the Seahawks game. And with this spread being 6.5 points, I kind of, you have to hit it. That's over 2 field goals, and I feel like that's what this game is going to come down to. So
yes, I do not see this being a high-scoring touchdown game. So yeah, that's a lot of points. All right, well, since we're sharing one, go ahead and take your second one.
Yes, this one is kind of a weird one. I don't 100% believe in it, but I 80% believe in this one. I've got the Chargers plus 1.5 against the Steelers. And the reason I think that is because I think the Chargers just can outright win this game. The Steelers have not played a potent offensive team. And I think what it'll come down to is, can the Chargers line stop the Steelers line? Because offensively, the Steelers can't really do much. Maybe we see some bigger plays from them because the Chargers defense isn't great, but the Chargers have been able to score. And granted, they played the Carolina Panthers and I believe it was the Raiders in week 1. So they have not necessarily faced the best opponents, and that's maybe where this line could be a little skewed. But I think the Chargers have a chance to win here, and I was struggling with other lines, so I think the Chargers plus 1.5 is a good one.
I really looked at this one. I really did. I'm glad I did not take it so that we can be a little bit different, but I think this is a line where it's like, yeah, it might as well be a pick'em between those two teams. You're getting value with 1.5 points. Games don't often end, separated by 1, but it's possible. And what this is two, as we've seen so far, two very stout defenses with two questionable offenses. And the Steelers' defense looks a little more stout, but the Chargers' offense looks a little less questionable. So I really think this is a toss-up. When you can get points on a toss-up, that's good value. So I totally get why you chose it. I'm going to avoid it because I think there are lines with more value, but I see the logic behind it.
I've also had George Pickens on. I think I have him on 2 fantasy teams, and the man just cannot produce. So I don't believe in the Steelers offense whatsoever.
You're ready. You're ready to get hurt again. All right. Well, that sounds good. I'm ready to move on to my second pick. And with that pick, there are a couple lines I really like. I'm going to do it. I'm going to overreact again, and I'm going to take the Arizona Cardinals plus 3 against the Detroit Lions. Through 2 weeks, what I've seen is a Lions offense that appears, anyway, to have really regressed from last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't doing anything like he did the last year. Sam Laporta is apparently in a coffin somewhere. I really high draft pick on one of my leagues and has been really letting all of us fantasy owners down. Jameson Williams has had so far a bit of a breakout for them, which is exciting, but overall this offense is not generating first downs, yards, points the way it was last year. So I think people are still looking at Detroit Lions and thinking that they're more than they have been. Maybe they could break out. But on the other hand, the Arizona Cardinals are probably, at this point right now, the most underrated offense in the NFL. Through 2 weeks, they have looked incredibly dynamic. It starts with the comeback of Kyler Murray. He looks fantastic in the pocket, throwing the ball downfield. When he's forced out of the pocket, he can still scramble. He seems to get 15 yards every time he leaves the pocket, but he doesn't like to do that. He's a pocket passer. So he has looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL through 2 weeks. James Conner, the ageless one. This running back is just quietly outstanding every week. He's a 6 yards a carry guy that gets 15 carries a game, generates 100 yards of offense, and scores a touchdown. He does it every single week. And their offensive weapons, everyone likes Greg Dortch, everyone likes Michael Wilson. Trey McBride is a big sleeper tight end that a lot of people are hot on. And we finally got the breakout game from Marvin Harrison Jr. that we were expecting. He got 0 for in week 1 and everyone thought he was a bust. Then he catches 2 30-plus yard touchdowns in the first quarter of the next game. I guess he's a little bit back. He's a real downfield weapon, that guy is. So I just look at this line and I see a team that I think is a far better offense, +3. I know their defense is worse. The Lions are going to put up points, but I kind of want to root for this Cardinals team. They're kind of fun to watch, and I'm excited to live and die by Kyler Murray and his legs.
I think this is overreaction week for the Cardinals, to be honest.
That's totally fair.
I think them beating up on a very, very injured Rams team has made people believe in them more than they should, and the Lions just losing to the Bucs. I think the Bucs may be better than people gave them credit for. So the disparity there means that the Cards overperformed, the Lions underperformed. That's why this line is so close. And I don't distrust the Lions yet. I'm not there. I think beginning of the season people were hot on the Lions, and it's been 2 games and they've played a couple good teams. Like the Lions played the Rams with generally their full roster, and it goes to overtime. They win by 6. And then obviously last week they played the Bucs, who they played in the playoffs last year. Like these are 2 good teams, and the Cardinals have not proven it to me yet to be within 3 points of the Lions. So sure. I stayed away from this for that reason, but I totally understand where you're coming from.
Loud and clear. This is classic, and I stated beforehand, classic overreaction. They could easily lose this week by like 17 points, and I could look like a moron, but I'm ready to overreact.
Yeah, this is the game where all of the favorites win by 10, and it's just none of the underdogs hit.
Then we can blame it on the lines. Then that's not our fault. We can only work. We're the artist. We can only work with the clay that we're given.
All right, with my third and final pick of the NFL Week 3 Sound Up Seattle Value Dogs, I am going to take.
Don't you do it.
The Eagles +2.5 against the Saints. And this is my go against the overreaction game. I think you had your overreaction game. This is my, hey, the Saints have scored 45 points a game for the last 2 games, and the Eagles looked a little rough there against the Falcons. This is their time to bounce back. I think this is where the Saints play a defense that is better at stopping the receiving game and the kind of outer fringes defensively. The Eagles have a nice, I guess, like back 7 is I guess what they call it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just really like the Eagles' defense against this Saints offense that's been very potent, but I think they have not played opponents that are the caliber that we expect.
I think this is my stay away game of the week. I was looking at this one too, and I completely get it. It's like Eagles plus points in any situation. There's value there. Couple things. One, the Saints diced up the Cowboys last week. I think it's undeniable that the Cowboys have a better defense than the Eagles do. That doesn't mean that maybe they didn't just have a bad game and the Saints just had a good game and hit some lucky plays. But Dallas has a better defense than the Eagles. Do you
really think that? They have Micah Parsons.
Yeah, they got talent all over the place. I could be proved wrong. That's my understanding.
That's fair.
But I also think the Eagles might have some injuries on offense. I'm not sure if A.J. Brown is playing in this game. I was really surprised to see the Eagles plus 2.5. So the main thing, injuries aside, opponents aside, my main thing here is when I see Eagles plus 2.5, I see every gambler in America betting on the Eagles. And when that happens, the Eagles lose because this is sports and none of it is influenced at all by outside forces. I'm just telling you, this is the line I see where it's everybody and their mother is going to take the Eagles and the Saints are going to win by 7 or 3 or 3. So that's my reason for staying away. I understand. Once again, it kind of looks like the obvious pick in some ways.
I just think it's reverse overreaction week. It's like I said, Saints minus 2.5, and they just beat the Cowboys by 30. This is our time to catch them at a positive, or catch an underdog against the Saints.
Yeah, is it reverse psychology or is it just psychology? That is the question. We will see. I love your calm, cool, and I'm just reacting to everything. I'm like a conspiracy guy here. It's Cardinals the best offense in the NFL, and don't trust the easy line. Okay, with my third pick, I'm gonna maybe get laughed out of the room, but I actually feel pretty good about this. I'm taking the Chicago Bears +1 against the Indianapolis Colts.
You were not impressed with the Colts last week.
Yeah, elephant in the room. My rancid dog last week. The Packers did end up covering the spread and winning outright against the Indianapolis Colts. Couple notes there. Anthony Richardson and the Colts offense. He looked like a rookie quarterback that's played like 3 professional football games in his life. I'm not holding that against him. He threw a couple bad picks. We know we're going to get those games from AR every other game this season. As a fan, I'm completely fine with that. That wasn't the issue. The issue is defensively. The Colts and Gus Bradley and this commitment to cover 3 and their refusal to change anything based on situation. Our whole point was Malik Willis is the worst quarterback wearing a jersey this week in football. And he was, but the Colts never made him prove it. All they did was run the ball over and over and over again. Colts stayed in cover 3 and just let them eat them up on the ground. So a big part of that loss was just horrendous defensive game calling, in my opinion. So I still think my point of why they were rancid still holds up. It just, nobody made them prove it. This Bears team, this offense has been such a struggle to watch. They've been bad. They've been straight up bad. Caleb has not been good. He's a rookie quarterback. Every week he should look a little better, in my opinion. And the way this Colts defense has been playing, this might be the tune-up game that they're looking for to get right. On the other side of the football, this Bears defense is really good. This Bears defense stopped Houston. Everyone stopped watching that Sunday Night Football game, Houston Bears, because it was just a mess. But the Bears defense stopped Houston, maybe the most dynamic offense in professional football, stopped them in their tracks for the entire second half. And the Bears just couldn't generate any points. But this Bears defense is coming off of weeks where they single-handedly turned a game around on the Texans, scored, 2 defensive touchdowns, generated like 3 turnovers, and were spectacular. And then a week where they stopped CJ Stroud in this dynamic Houston offense. I think they are going to eat Anthony Richardson alive. I think they are. I'm really worried about my boy AR. And it's for that reason. Defensively alone, they could score more defensively than the Colts will generate offensively. We might need nothing from Caleb for this to cover. So that's why I like this line.
Yeah, I looked at that one. I was a little nervous just because we saw the Colts perform well offensively in week 1. And it is, week 3. It's early in the season. We will see what happens with these guys that are basically both rookie quarterbacks.
Sure.
And I just, a 1-point line with either of these guys right now, I would not take if it was, if it was the Colts -1 versus the Raiders. I don't think I could take that.
Sure.
Like I just am worried about this Colts the Colts as a line, and the Bears +1 scares me because Caleb could throw up a dud. And I agree with you that the Bears defense looks great, but if your offense isn't generating anything, then I just can't take you +1. But I understand where you're coming from.
Totally. Yeah. If you're looking at 2 rookies and don't trust them, look to the defense. And the Bears have a much better defense. That's my thought.
That's fair. All right. Is there anything else? Those have been our Week 3 NFL Sound Up Seattle value dog picks.
No, that was excellent. I think we're a good time.
Yeah. All right. Well, for John Carey, I am Tyler Cartwright. This has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere that's important. Send us your questions, comments, concerns, or just comments on our YouTube video because that's there now. But you can email us at soundupseattle@gmail.com. Other than that, you could find John
watching football all day, every day, baby. It's all I do.
You don't just have the Mariners games on all the time, watching them.
Who are the Mariners?
We've moved on. We've become football fans now.
That's correct.
I guess with all that being said, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Cougs, baby.